Good morning, dear students. Once again, welcome back to the English literature class. Today, we are continuing with the same poem, unit number 4, After Blenheim, written by Robert Southey, part 3. Do you remember what we were discussing in the previous class? Old Casper, after working throughout the day, was sitting in front of his cottage. In front of him, there was playing his two young grandchildren, Peterkin and Wilhelmine. While playing near the stream, Peterkin got a skull, and for him it was the first time he saw a skull in his life. That way he was not knowing what it is. He took it to his grandfather to get some information about it. And old Casper was telling about the great battle between the English and the French. That's what we were discussing in the previous class. Let's see what he was talking about or how the war affected his life. That's what we are going to discuss today. My father lived at Blenheim then, yon little stream hard by. They burned his dwelling to the ground, and he was forced to fly. So with his wife and child he fled, nor had he where to rest his head. A few new words are there. First one, yon, which means beyond, near to. Second word, hard by, which means very near. Third one, dwelling, which means a house or building to live in. Here we can take the example, house. Fourth one, fly, which means run away. Now let's see what is the meaning of this paragraph. My father lived at Blenheim then, with a little stream hard by. So, my father. So, old Casper says about his father. So, old Casper's father lived at Blenheim then. So, at that time, during the time of war, old Casper's father, he was living near the Blenheim, lived at Blenheim, yon little stream hard by. Yon means beyond little stream, very near, which means very near to the little stream. They burned his dwelling to the ground. So he was already having a building, a house in which he was living with his child. You might be getting some idea. Who is the child here? Yeah, old Casper is the child here. So he was the one and only child of his father. So old Casper's father, who lived at Blenheim during the time of war, and their house was very near to the little stream. And the enemies, they burned old Casper's house. Or in other words, the enemies, or just because of the war, or as an impact of the war, or old Casper's father, he lost his house, and he was forced to fly, which means just because he lost all his property, all his wealth, it forced him to run away from Blenheim. So with his wife and child he fled. Fled means to run away, the same meaning. So with his wife means old Casper's father. Old Casper's father with his wife and child. Who is the child here? Old Casper himself. So old Casper's father, mother, and old Casper himself. But at that time, old Casper was a child. So those three people, they fled from Blenheim. They ran away from Blenheim. Nor had he where to rest his head. So till the end of his life, he was really struggling to find out a location, a place to settle. With fire and sword, the country around was wasted far and wide. And many a childing mother then and newborn baby died. But things like that, must be at every famous victory. Few new words are there. Wasted far and wide, which means great, destructing and devastating was caused. So, just because of the war, just as an impact of the war. With fire and sword, the country round was wasted far and wide. People fought with a number of weapons, different kinds of arms. They fought each other. And its impact was so huge and big. Great destruction and devastation was caused because of the war between both the countries. As I have already told you, in the war there is no success, no winners, but all are losers. Because both the country will face huge destruction and loss. And many, a childing mother then, a newborn baby died. A new word is there, childing mother, which means a lady who is expecting a child, or in other words, a pregnant lady. So, many a childing mother then and a newborn baby died. Number of people who lost. Here we can take the meaning like so many number of children, they lost their parents. And so many number of parents, they lost their children. So the destruction was so huge and the casualty was also very huge. But things like that, must be at every famous victory. But you have to remember one thing, behind every famous victory, certain things will be like that. For the great victory, number of people have to sacrifice their life. Number of people will be dying in every or behind every famous victory. So, with fire and sword, the country round was wasted far and wide, and many a childing mother then and newborn baby died. But things like that, must be at every famous victory. So behind every famous victory, number of childing mother will die, number of newborn baby will die, and destructions and devastations will be taking place. So it is a normal phenomenon. That's what old Casper says about the war. He himself or his father lost his dwelling. They lost all their property. They fled from that place and migrated to another place. Even though such things happen in his life, he is trying to justify the war by saying that it was a famous victory, and behind every such famous victory, such incidents will take place. They say it was a shocking sight after the fleet was won. For many thousand bodies here lay rotting in the sun. But things like that, must be after a famous victory. There's a new word for you. The field was won, which means the battle was won. So they say it was a shocking sight after the field was won. Once the war was over, it was a shocking sight. Because the war field was filled with something. For many thousand bodies here lay rotting in the sun. Under the sun, the area which came under the war was fully filled with thousands of dead bodies. So the author says, or here old Casper says, it was really a shocking sight that many thousand bodies were there lying rotting in the sun after once the battle got over. But things like that, must be after a famous victory. So it is quite natural that behind every famous victory, there will be such kinds of incidents, such kinds of things will happen. So here, old Casper is still trying to justify the concept of the war. He is telling that it was a famous victory. And it is just because of his ignorance. He still do not know what was the reason behind the war, what was the cause behind the war, for what purpose both the countries fought together. But the whole country was praising their leaders, their rulers, by saying that it was a famous victory. Even old Casper says to his grandchildren, even they have suffered a lot. Even the old Casper suffered a lot. He was trying to justify by saying that it was a famous victory. So dear students, I hope that you have got some idea about the 3 stanzas which I have explained today. Here we are winding up today's class, and in the next class we will be winding up this chapter. We will be discussing the last stanzas of the chapter. Still then, I would like to sign off. Thank you.